So we're going to rank every player with 10 starts or more for England under Gareth Southgate and talk about the impact that they've had. And 30th, I've got Michael Keane. I can't remember Michael Keane much. I kind of sort of, I picture him in a bit of a, like an away kit, maybe like a blue shirt with a lighter blue collar. But that's literally it. He scored 1 goal, got 10 games for England and didn't do a hell of a lot. Broadly on his career, he's one of those, and centre-back's one of those positions, I think, where you can start to turn into like a clown. And we're going to talk about this. Well,
literally.
Not literally. No, that would look weird, wouldn't it? But I think the centre-back position, in terms of being like, you're sort of big and then can start to look clumsy if you make errors. I'm thinking, well, we're going to talk about Harry Maguire later because he's higher up in the list. Or like way back in the day, someone like Titus Bramble. Or like, I'm sure you could think of a centre-back for Bolton or for any club that is like got to a point where he was just like, it was almost like his legs weren't working.
I see.
Do you know what I mean? I feel like Michael Keane, who obviously was at Man United, did really well at Burnley and got that move to Everton. He's kind of like drifted into that world.
He's had his value for England in between tournaments, but you certainly would never put him in a conversation of going to a tournament, I don't think.
No, I agree. So who have you put in 29th spot?
Well, I've put Ben Chilwell, but I'm starting to look at some of the names above that and think, actually, have I been a little bit brutal? It's just because I don't want to get caught up in sort of recency and thinking, because we've seen him in an England shirt more recently, so does he automatically go higher? Whenever I see him in an England shirt, I just think, I wish Luke Shaw was fit.
Yeah, so he was awful at the weekend. That recency bias definitely played a part in this. I just think he's not. I can't figure out if he's fulfilling his potential or did everyone get a bit too excited about him. I think he is a great fullback and he's what you want from a fullback. I think fullbacks at the moment, it's a weird place to be where you actually, before, if you're a fullback, you're a fullback. You can go from any team and just like slot in. Now, there's so much more dexterity to that role. And Ben Chilwell is a bit of a throwback. There's, maybe there's that sort of Robertson element to him in terms of just being out and out and pretty attacking as well. I think defensively, I don't feel certain about him. And I don't think he's had much impact. I think there's been a bit of it felt like a straight shootout at one point between him and Luke Shaw. And you could, you could have an argument for either. But now, like you just said, you literally just said it.
Yeah, I would rather Kieran Trippier play on that side.
Then Ben
Chilwell. If it comes to it, yeah, 100%. Because I'd be so concerned if it was him and say Maguire next to him. I'd be so concerned at how much Declan Rice had to do to help those guys out that would take away from the rest of our midfield. So I think if you're thinking of how you can deal with a player being there, then they've not really performed for the country in the way that perhaps they could.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you just wanted a lot more from him. He's in a sort of bad place at the moment. 17 games for England, or 17 starts, 19 appearances in total. So he's had, like, generally when he's played, he's started. Yet when you think of any of the major tournaments, he's not. You don't think of him, you think of Luke Shaw. So I think again that kind of speaks volumes about. I think also a big thing with him has obviously been injuries. That's been a problem in all of this. He's got 1 goal. He's just not really had much impact, so I think that's an easy one for us. Okay, let's keep moving. 28th spot.
Yeah, Gary Cahill.
So you're not bumping Gary up.
So I believe he retired just after 2018, right?
I can get his details up.
There was a group of players that did that. It was him, I believe Joe Hart, and also Jamie Vardy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he had, in terms of overall caps, 61 appearances, 5 goals for England.
Well, how are we doing this list though? Is it on? Is it in the Southgate era?
Yes, yeah. We're confined to the Southgate era, absolutely. So I think with that in mind, I think his England career was coming to an end by that point. He withdrew injured in 2012. He was there in 2016, of course, both before Southgate as well. But yeah, he's again another one with very little impact when it comes to Southgate. And actually, in terms of clusters, I sort of put I didn't have him as my next one, actually. I had Connor Cody next up.
Wow.
I think Connor Cody's been useful in terms of, I think Southgate likes a couple of out-and-out Euro 96 leaders, right? So if you've got players who are not going to be the star, can they kind of provide glue otherwise? And Connor Cody was never going to play much. And Southgate would talk about him quite a lot. But overall, again, I don't think he was ever really up to it.
I suppose it just depends on what you value in football and what you don't. Do you value the fact that at that Euros, his involvement was literally not on the pitch? It was off the pitch. But everyone around that England camp, they made a half-serious joke about the fact that he was their player of the tournament because of what he was like in the camp.
But is that only because, one, he's very gregarious, but two, because he wasn't playing?
Yes, that's a good question. I feel like you need to be a fly on the wall and just know what jokes was he put? How good were these jokes?
Yeah, exactly. As well, I think also the things like, I'm going to upset a lot of people here, but when I was growing up, you had managers player of the year, you had players player of the year, you had most improved, and then you would have a clubman award, and the clubman was essentially the person who wasn't really getting the games, and I feel like that's kind of what happened with Cody. I remember doing a squad selector for that tournament for 2021, and he was in because I thought he was of use, and I think those centre back positions are quite interesting in terms of, okay, you've got your starters, and then you've got your guy who comes in if someone gets injured, and then there's another one just in case. And so I think I did it the other day, and it was Lewis Dunk was the next one that I put in there for kind of similar reasons, to kind of be that glue if it does get to that point. But yeah, okay. Next up, who have you gone for?
So I've got Joe Hart.
Okay.
Again, these are not really Southgate era players.
So I don't think we need to talk about his time with England under Southgate, but overall, in terms of his career, how do you feel about Joe Hart's England career? 75 appearances.
Totally disrespected. Really disrespected. The amount of people that I hear. It was someone on a podcast actually, and I can't remember who it was. Which is good. Yeah, it wasn't you.
It wasn't me, right? Well,
someone had said that they'd really underplayed him, and they were being presented with what he'd done and what he'd done for Manchester City and England, and they still couldn't wrap their head around the idea that he was a successful goalkeeper, and it's really crazy how his legacy is gone.
I honestly think if you're there's the English sort of, it's like the clownification of footballers. It happens more and more and more. And I think it's now broadly on social media with new signings for high fees that don't hit the ground running. But for a long, long time, it's always been England. And again, I keep coming back to that theory of, same with the newspapers, I would imagine, and if you're a little bit older and you can remember those times, the tabloids were so all over England. But again, it would have been for the similar reasons that there's nothing else to talk about. So if you've got to, talk about La Liga and Barcelona and Real Madrid and what's it called, Marca and is it AS, the newspapers that every day there's something on you. Yeah. Over an international break, that becomes England because there's nothing else going on. So the spotlight on these players when things go wrong can get pretty heavy. Joe Hart, I think what's great is that he went to Celtic, is doing well there, did well there, and that kind of retrieved his career a little bit. Guardiola killed him. There
was a time when Joe Hart was honestly minimum top 3 best in the world, potentially arguably at one point best in the world goalkeeper.
Yeah. I think he was. I think what's interesting about him, he's very intense. And I think, especially with 2016, that intensity, people started to sort of not kind of enjoy that. And when Guardiola came in, he, if you read anything on Pep Guardiola, and obviously Cruyff before that, the goalkeeper has to be involved in the build-up. So his days were numbered. If Joe Hart had actually done some research on Pep Guardiola before he comes through the door, he would have known, like he might want his own guy for this. But I think he's disrespected. 75 caps, I think just through a very difficult era. And I think that's the shame when it comes to him. 26th spot?
Danny Rose.
Really?
Yeah, where have you got him? You think
higher? Oh, not too much. Oh, he's coming. He's on his way.
His involvement in 2018, for you, it's big.
Yeah. I think he had a solid career for England. I think he was useful for Southgate. Obviously, Ashley Young played in some of those games as well. So maybe I've bumped him up a little bit too high. Maybe I'm getting myself a little bit confused here. But yeah, do you know what? I think I might be wrong with that actually, because I've got Dele Alli, which I feel like is harsh now.
I mean, I've only got him one place above that. So
Okay.
yeah, I can get on board with Dele Alli being there. I feel like he's a what could have been player.
Yeah.
100%.
Do you know what? I think you're right. I think you're spot on. I'm happy to go with you. I think you're bang on. So you had Joe Hart, especially when it comes to Southgate, then Danny Rose, then Dele Alli.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you feel about Dele Alli? Obviously, like so much has gone on with him as well, because in terms of his big moments for Southgate, 2018, the quarterfinal against Sweden, he scores the second goal to sort of take us through and calm it all down. Scores a good header there. It was a midfield in 2018, which, if you think of the evolution of England, it's quite good to see those three tournaments because actually you can see the changes. But 2018, it was all a bit of a shock for us to get as far as we did. We had a good, run in terms of the games that we played. But Dele Alli, in terms, he was there. It's him, Lingard, and Henderson, I think.
Yeah, ultimately he was a standout though in a team. When you look back and reflect on that team, our England team, generally speaking, our squad wasn't that great, and we really didn't have the attacking talent that we've grown to have. So he was much more relied upon as an individual, as an attacking individual, than many of our current attacking individuals, and that does count for something.
Yeah, you're right, and I think you're right in the way that you've mixed that up. Actually, this is good. This is why we talk it through. I like it. Next up, 24th.
Reece James.
Me too.
Yeah.
So again, this is one where, in terms of for England and under Southgate, in such a stacked area of the pitch.
Injury as well. Was it a thigh injury
Constant.
picked up that ruled him out of the last World Cup?
Yeah.
So, honestly, I think he'd be higher up if he had been not injured. It's so sad. I know he was absolutely gutted as well when he was injured.
Do you think that he would have ever turned his back on Kyle Walker for Reece James, Southgate? If Reece James had been fit and firing the whole time, because the conversation generally was that Trent's obviously unbelievable going forward. Kyle Walker's, the recovery pace is so useful and amazing. And Reece James is kind of like a bit of both. And I always said that he was the most complete of that out and out right back, which has obviously morphed and changed again, as we've spoken about.
I think he could have played them both, to be honest. I think that, look at the way that Southgate is trying to get Trent into the team, into midfield. I think he would have played a back three, and he would have tried to play both Reece James and Kyle Walker personally against better sides, especially when you've got players like Mbappe. You need Kyle Walker at the end of the day to compete against Mbappe, but I think he would have tried to fit Reece James on the pitch as well.
Yeah. I think Kyle Walker just never. I don't even want to say it. He had actually. I mean, he's had the odd penalty. There's a penalty against Tunisia, wasn't there? He's had a few moments. Yeah, a really sad one for Reece James. Like, he should be higher than he is. His career should be different. And I always feel a bit funny about sort of, with the injury side of it. People sort of start to go, oh, he's got injured again, like he's meant to do it on purpose. It is a real shame because he's so good, so good. Who have you got in 23rd?
Well, I've got Jadon Sancho, but I'm starting to think maybe I would have probably put Reece James above Jadon Sancho.
Really?
Come to think of it.
So Jadon Sancho's highlights of, I think, Euro 2020. I'm just going to say 2020 because obviously we know it was in 2 different years. 2020, it was the game in Rome against Ukraine. Came on, did well, was effective. I think there's a few here where, obviously, a lot of the names here, no one's really like totally spent in terms of being finished now, especially from here in, really. maybe one, depending on your opinion. Two, maybe. But Jadon Sancho, his career is in the balance at the moment, right? And he's doing well for Borussia Dortmund. I think he's feeling good there.
Do you think he's anywhere near the squad this year, or is he a complete out of question no?
So I think that the fact that he isn't is pretty damning on him. Like that, it shouldn't get to that point for whatever reason. Like the thing I struggle with, the sort of falling out there with Ten Hag is, can it not be resolved? Like he's clearly talented. Like I appreciate standards and I appreciate accountability and punishment. That's all fine, but the inability to resolve it, I thought was just poor, like on everyone's part. And look, he's doing well at Dortmund, of course, and Dortmund's still in the Champions League at the moment, at the time of recording, so he could have even more impact between now and the end of the season. But yeah, he's not, like, in terms of, especially if you think of a squad, a 23-man squad, you've got 3 goalies and then you've got 2 in every other position, and I think there are so many people on the right-hand side. You've got Cole Palmer. If you wanted to provide loyalty to someone, it would be to someone like Raheem Sterling, probably over Sancho. I've always liked Raheem Sterling on the right-hand side, but he never seems to play there. Saka, obviously, Foden can play out there as well. So there's not really any space for him.
Jared Bowen's in more conversations than Jadon Sancho, and I think rightly so.
Yeah, I agree with you.
On form.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So yeah, I think, again, he will... This was another thing I was thinking when I was looking at this list and placing Jadon Sancho was, I think we've never had the overall depth that we've got now. And so previously these players are like, oh, they were the next thing, and then we kind of lost them. It feels more, is that actually as tragic as the scenario is now, or is it just the fact that we're stacked in those kind of areas? Yeah,
stacked. And also 23-man squad as opposed to a 26-man squad as well is making it really tough.
Yeah, totally. Okay, we're into sort of the mid-batch here. 22nd.
So I've got Connor Cody there. So I must just place a lot more value on these jokes.
Yeah. Love a comedian. Fair enough. No, I understand. In 22nd, I had Tyrone Mings, and then I had Jadon Sancho. Again, it would have been interesting to see how in a different world, in a different season where he doesn't get injured this year with what Villa have created, do they create what they've created? Probably, maybe. And is he... Because Southgate likes him.
Yeah, and also I think it's important as well to remember that we actually needed him at a tournament as well. At the beginning of the Euros, we needed him, and 2 clean sheets as well in the games that he played. Fair play to him. So he's had a real use to Southgate.
That's true. Very true. And people weren't sure. They really weren't sure going into those 2 games as well. And that's what I'm kind of hanging on to when it comes to the Euros as well, is that I think everything... I watched that England-Brazil game, I just thought, this feels so disjointed. Like, that no one knows. At the top level, or any level, you need to know where you're going to play the ball. Like, and you need to know that they're going to be there, because defences are really strong. And so, therefore, without that, it's either about individual ability, which is why I think Jude Bellingham stands out a lot of the time, or it's about doing things quicker. And I think by the time we get to the tournament, again, if you look at the World Cup, that game against Iran was at that game, and we just peppered them. Like, and I'm not saying they're good. So I think the mix between the opponents that you're facing, which I think in the Euros steps up a notch, to be honest, obviously, but that alongside having a team that will be right, we've done the qualifiers, everything's sorted now. This is our team. This is how we're moving forwards. I think that chemistry and that connection will start to kick into place a little bit more. And so these scary moments when you sort of bring in someone like Tyrone Mings, it wasn't actually as scary as you thought. But another one where I think Southgate does, especially the guys that are going to probably be a sub, he wants leaders, because he wants people that are going to behave to sort of sustain that happy camp that you're talking about. Who you got in 20th?
Oh yeah, I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold.
So do I.
Because I've got him below Tyrone Mings.
Oh, okay.
Both are quite low, though, when you think about it, the quality of player that we're talking about here. But I don't know who's to blame for it. I just don't. Obviously, injury played a part again. It's yet another player who had unfortunate time with injury. But also, he has just... I just don't think Southgate has found a way to get him in that team when he has been available.
Do you criticise Southgate for not finding that, or do you commend him for accepting that Kyle Walker's a better fit, Trippier's a better fit? Do you know what I mean?
I'll make that decision this tournament, because this is the tournament where Trent will go into it. He will be fit, he'll be ready, and he'll be an option. I do think a lot of nations are not afraid to put superstars on the bench. Don't be afraid to do that in a tournament, and don't be afraid to have him as an option to come on.
Yeah.
And how Southgate does that will actually make my decision.
Yeah. Well dodged. I think so. 19 starts, only 23 appearances, 2 goals. He's been not used 24 times, which I think is interesting. Yeah, it's difficult. These in a sort of a stacked space with a cautious manager. I think in a far more free flowing team. Because I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about you've got to get Foden on the ball. In the Brazil game, and I was like, that kind of makes sense. But Kyle Walker got injured. Ezri Konsa came on, who's going to sit there, and so if you want to retain any kind of width, Foden has to stay wide. He can't come and just sort of have that free role. So I think we sort of, I always sort of trust in him for now, but I get your point. It's like, if you have so much quality, can we find a way to get him on the pitch? I think there's such a balance between doing it to the detriment of the overall team and just going, well, hang on a minute, this guy's like incredible. So yeah, Trent, I agree with you. You've got to, but I would have thought this a while ago. And the problem for him is because he's been injured, he's not been in the squad. But he has to. I think in November he would have got to a point where Southgate would have gone, he has to play. We have to find a way to fit him in. So who have you got in 19?
Tyrone Mings.
You got Tyrone Mings there. Okay. I've got Jesse Lingard, and I have Mason Mount in 18th. Talk to me about those two then, because I think both have had impact in different ways. Lingard, just that World Cup in 2018, scored against Panama. Mason Mount is one where he's been involved a lot, but there was always this question mark about his overall impact.
This is the thing, though. I suppose I'm starting to wonder now, having made a mistake not putting him a little bit further up, because I've always been pro Mason Mount. I've always thought we needed him, but I'm also in the camp that believes that Conor Gallagher will be good as our third midfielder. So I think I'm on a certain I think there's two sides of England fans. Some that want us to go for it in games and think that we're really playing dull, restrictive football, and some that want to make sure we're not vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people see us as boring, and I'm willing to accept that. But I was always, Mason Mount has to be in that midfield to keep us safe, because he's willing to do all that off the ball work, and it doesn't look pretty. And on the ball, he's definitely was never the best player, but he did enough for England that he did a role for England that I didn't think there was anyone else that could do. And I think it's similar, that kind of similar thing with Gallagher in terms of being willing.
Yeah, Lingard obviously. So they both kind of played similar position, I guess, as well. If you think about it, Mason Mount in the Euros, he just kind of didn't get the goals, and it was one where this is the problem, is that there's so much like discourse that once you say one thing, people can then use that against you. And I remember going, if stop watching the ball and watch where Mason Mount is, you'll actually see what the use that he's providing. He's sort of seeing things before they happen, or he's pulling someone away in terms of his movement. I think Mason Mount is one of the most intelligent footballers in the Premier League. And when I've seen him, for Man United in particular, there's often been moments where he doesn't want to play killer balls a lot of the time. I think he's been very well coached, and he wants to play things smart and quickly. And that's what, the higher the level, the more people just pop it about, because that's the right pass. And so that, again, on a highlight reel might not look as impressive. So I think Mason Mount's had a sort of tough time. I really hope he does get back to where he was. Obviously, he's at a good club there, but I fear there might be a sort of a Van der Beek element with him. where he just might not get the opportunity at Man United?
I just don't think he was an appropriate signing for Manchester United, and he's become the victim of that because he's sort of just been washed away.
It was an odd choice from him because Bruno Fernandes is there.
Yeah. So
I'm sure they would have said, well, we see you guys both playing like with each other. Maybe we'll see now in the end of the season, we might see some of that. And I guess he kind of replaced Jesse Lingard a little bit in the squad. But Jesse Lingard, he's at FC Seoul at the moment. Was solid for England. Always good for a goal, generally. Yeah, I think he's a bit of we're in a sort of the meh region, I think, in terms of impact for England right now. I think him and Mount is in a little mini cluster between the two of them for sure.
Yeah, these are players that have had their moments, but in terms of consistency across the whole Southgate era, I think we're going to start to see more of that higher up.
Okay. In 17th, Phil Foden is my pick. A lot of talk about him being disappointing again at the weekend, but the blame being laid on Southgate. I'll tell you what. When you rank how important the starting 11 for England is right now, where is he on that?
That's a really good question. See, he starts in my starting 11, but he starts beyond the midfield, in front of the midfield. So because of that, it does make me wonder, actually, does it work that he starts? And it's so frustrating because Phil Foden, Manchester City Phil Foden, it feels ridiculous that he wouldn't start.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to this idea that unless you can fit them in a system, is it the end of the world that they're on the bench? And actually, because you look at that front three, and I think a lot of people say Foden, Kane, Saka. But me being devil's advocate, these are people that wouldn't put Foden in the midfield.
Right.
Me being devil's advocate would suggest, actually, would somebody like Cole Palmer or someone who's more suited to that further up the pitch role be better in that position? So then the question becomes, do you trust Rice, Bellingham, Foden?
What, defensively, do you mean?
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
I think, because I think in terms of energy, fitness, Foden certainly has that. I think when it comes to sort of that cautious element of Southgate and that third midfielder. So, and if you want to be kind of attacking him and also give Bellingham free rein, you play Henderson or Gallagher or Calvin Phillips. But if you are kind of going, well, no, we're better than you, and Bellingham, you're going to have to do some defensive work, which I think he's more than capable of, obviously. And Foden, you're going to have to work defensively as well, but it'll probably allow you to get the ball in new places. I would absolutely do it. That's my midfield three, I think.
So it's your midfield three, no matter who we play, though? Or is it just your midfield three against teams where they will be setting up a low block against us?
I think certainly the latter. I think against the best teams, so I talk about this all the time. In most teams, you're either concerned about them or you're letting them be concerned about you, and there is a tipping point with a team. Like Bolton get promoted, that concern flips a little bit often. I think with England, this is where this comes back to sort of maybe the frustration and the fair critique on England now, is that this isn't 2018, this isn't 2020. This is 2024, and these players are like getting into their prime. They've got experience of playing in Champions League finals regularly. So, like, give them the keys a little bit and go, well, no, you're an adult. Go and win. Go win the game and tackle, and press and do everything. Like, I think to suggest that Foden, Bellingham, and Rice aren't capable of both, for me, seems mad.
No, to be fair, you've actually convinced me a bit, because I've always been of that. We need that third midfielder to be someone to balance that team out, and I still think I believe that. But at the same time, I get this idea as well that if we go into games and we do that, and the opposition nations look on our bench and they see all this talent we've got, but the reason why they're not in the team is because we're too scared and because we're so focused on shutting up shop and being protecting ourselves, it does create this sort of idea that in those games we never feel like favourites. Yeah,
and I think it's time to accept that we're favourites. Like, I think we'll win it. I do think we'll win it. I just keep coming back to the fact that if you sort of box in your mind, you go, Declan Rice, just sit there. But Bellingham could sit there if he had to.
Yeah.
Like for 20 seconds, Bellingham could do anything. And Foden, you can press. Like, I think they can all do it all. So, anyway, I'm excited by it. Next up, I've got Calvin Phillips in 16th. I think did very, very, very well in those Euros. I think he, due to club form and a lack of opportunity with Man City, is now in a place where he's low on confidence. I think that's very clear. He's gone to West Ham and hoping that would just click it all into place, and sometimes it does. It doesn't seem to have done it as of yet. I totally believe that he will come good, and it will play, several games for England in the future. And I think people actually I think he gets a little bit of disrespect in terms of how good he actually is. I thought he was very, very useful for us in what Southgate wanted. Again, where if we're not sort of pigeonholing players into you're a 10 and you're an 8 or whatever, he's kind of a little bit of everything. And in terms of impact, that first goal in Euro 2020. That was a great bit of movement from him playing in a pass to Sterling.
Yeah, I remember watching that game because when he was announced in the lineup, there was a lot of what? How come he's in the team? But he's just performed so brilliantly in that game, and also he was part of one of the most secure national teams in terms of defensively at a tournament that I've seen. And without him, I don't think it would have been.
And do you know what? That's what Southgate always comes back to, and like it or hate it. He thinks that if we don't concede, we'll get one. And that's why he generally leans the other way. But as the team evolves, maybe you've got to change that up. You don't need to win 4-0. 2-0 is enough. So that's kind of been his MO, I think, a lot of the time. And that's why Calvin Phillips has been involved. Yeah, I think it was one of those ones where, if we had nothing else, because I think, say, 4 months ago, we were still going, well, Phillips might be in there. I'd be okay with that. Obviously, you'd like to have something a bit more spicy, but I don't think it's the end of the world. Okay, next up, 15th. I've got Jude Bellingham.
I've got Jordan Henderson.
You've got Jordan Henderson there? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, okay. So I've got Jordan Henderson much higher up.
Which I totally understand. I think based on what he's done, he'd be higher up. But I also am a believer of that you can tarnish things as well.
Oh, right, I see.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, let's stay with Jordan Henderson. So that you've dropped him down because of the tarnishing, not because of on-field stuff.
Yeah, because isn't what is it, when we say, what these players have done for us, at the end of the day, we've never won anything. So it can only go so far respecting a player for what they've done for you, because we've still not ever won a tournament. And the events, within the last year, I'm not a fan. And I'm in that camp of I don't want him on the plane.
Really?
Yeah, not at all. I'd be really disappointed.
Because you can't forgive what he's done?
It just sets a dangerous precedent, I think, within calling players up. Because if you're a player like Mainu, like Gallagher, like Curtis Jones, whatever you think of all these individual players, who is better, who is worse, these players have been in top form. They've been working so hard. They've shown that they are good enough to be there. And if someone like Jordan Henderson gets the call up beyond them, I'd just be like, what's the point? Clearly, being a young player counts for so little under Southgate if he's going to put someone like Henderson before you.
But I would say, to play devil's advocate, he has, 2018, was good in the tournament. 2020, sort of there and of use when needed, scored against Ukraine. And in 2022, sort of got himself into the team and scored in that tournament as well. Very impressive in that tournament as well. So, and it's not like Southgate's been afraid to bring in young players. He's done that. So don't you need a sprinkling of... He's
done that, but he has always stood by experienced players. He has stood by older players in a lot of situations. And whether or not that's the right thing or not can be agreed. But probably a lot of the time it was the right thing. But this would be too far, because there is always, you can always see an angle why he's gone with the experienced player. I can still see an angle as to why he would go with Harry Maguire, for example, in that centre-back position. But I don't see an angle of why he would go with Jordan Henderson. Jordan Henderson has not been good enough for a while now on the pitch. And I think he's really destroyed this image of leadership with what he's done as well. So what is it that he actually brings to that 23-man squad that the other players don't?
I would, again, devil's advocate, I would say that within the realms of the sport itself, he has shown leadership time and again, right? He's obviously made a decision for money, which is overridden his broad, his broad feelings that we all should have, right? But he couldn't say no to that money, and then he's made it worse by talking about it and not being transparent with it. But the leadership skills within the sport itself remain. And coming back to what we were talking about, Cody, Dunk, Mings, he's in that realm, I think, a little bit, in an area where when we talk about the third midfielder, we're not as stacked. And I think Southgate thinks, of course, he's tailing off, but if he's just going to be kind of here and help retain the standards, and then also, if we need that third midfielder for 20 minutes here and there to sort of get us through something, I think he still thinks he's of use. I wonder if Southgate's already decided he's going, and I think he thinks this is the end of the cycle, and so I don't care about the next guy because I just want one of my guys with me for this next one. But obviously there are other elements of play. Like, I totally get that. And he's not been in my squad because I think once he went to Saudi Arabia, I was like, well, you're not playing elite football. The fact that he's gone back to Ajax is something in terms of him, and he's playing, obviously, playing in big European games and stuff like that. So that will help between now and then. But yeah, I think he had an opportunity to move on from him, and he didn't for whatever reason he wanted to choose. Okay, we're in the top 15 now. Who've got in 14th spot?
Jude Bellingham.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've spoken about Jude Bellingham, and I'm obsessed with him. I think he's incredible. And again, watching recent internationals, I do think there's still a real place weirdly for the individual. Because that sort of free-flowing like level that you see in the Premier League, I just wasn't. I rarely see it. Again, is that on Southgate or is that another thing? I don't know. But I think Bellingham has the capability to, and I wonder if Southgate's leaning on him maybe a little bit too much. That is a fear of mine when you have got other great players knocking about, but we haven't seen them all together too much. But I think he's special. So special. What do you think about Bellingham?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he ignites excitement going into a tournament that only a very small amount of players can genuinely ignite. Having someone like him on my team excites me even more than having someone like Harry Kane on my team. And I absolutely adore Harry Kane, but it's because you've got... We literally could be going into this tournament with the best player in the world. Arguably, and that's just so exciting.
It is so exciting.
I went to watch Real Betis versus Real Madrid earlier in the season, and I just kept my eye on him. He scored an amazing goal that game, but every time I looked at him, you could just see it was like really impatiently waiting for a moment to do something in the game. It was bugging him that he wasn't involved in everything that was going on.
I've said this. I said he's in a rush to be great.
Yeah, and
he's snarling. Like, his body language is wild. Like, you can't keep your eyes off him, and he eats the ground. For Real Madrid, they sort of own the ball a little bit more, but there's a lovely freedom with Real Madrid as well that allows him to sort of kind of go where he needs to. But when he starts to like rev, he just eats the ground. Yeah. It's wild. He will be much higher on this list in a few years' time. I'm excited by him. I've got Jack Grealish.
I've got him 12th spot.
Jack Grealish, I think, in terms of impact for England, I think he's a great sub and a great change to maybe the rhythm of a game if you need him. He will win fouls, which I think will be very, very important. I think he's one of the best. He's probably the best in the world at winning a foul.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, he played almost like an attacking 8 for Aston Villa against QPR. We beat him 1-0. He probably won 25 fouls. He won another one, and he's brilliant. And that's a cracking little cheat code to have if you need it, if you're getting into the last 10 minutes of a game. Had a frustrating season this season, but also when you talk about conversations with England and starting lineups. That Euro 2020, everyone's desperate for him to play, weren't they?
Oh my days, literally. Oh, I genuinely think that Southgate, he would have had to watch his back if he hadn't started him at some point. We were just literally waiting for it to happen. I remember at Wembley as well when he came on and when his name was said.
The Germany game?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, what game.
Energy.
Yeah.
And obviously he showed up in the game as well.
It's definitely had impact. Quite a few assists, actually.
That's a fascinating one, though, is Grealish. It feels so like sudden that he's now not really in as many conversations for this tournament.
Yeah.
It just feels, but you can still understand it.
Yeah, I think the problem for him, in my opinion, is when you have Harry Kane who wants to drop deep, you need people that are going to go beyond. And I think because of that, he's actually at threat a little bit when it comes to the squad because Gordon and Rashford will go and do that. And I think that's who he wants there, first and foremost. But as I say, a different option and obviously amazing player. 13th spot.
Yeah, it's making me chuckle that I'm looking at a list where I've got Eric Dyer higher than Jude Bellingham. Yeah, Eric Dyer.
Okay, I've got Eric higher than that, probably for a similar reason to you. I'll tell you what, we'll talk about Eric when we get to my placing for him. 13th, Marcus Rashford for me. I wonder if I've got him a little bit high here. I think he feels about okay. Had a great World Cup in 2022. Has done great things. And in terms of impact, good or bad, obviously missing a penalty.
Yeah, but I've got him even higher, haven't I? As you can see.
Yeah.
But the reason why is because I think it's funny because we're stacked with attackers now. Actually, I've found that in Southgate's era, we were very reliant on Kane and Kane's goals. But actually, if you go beyond that, I'd say the other players that I think about when I think who can go and get England a goal, I think of Rashford, Saka and Sterling. And then obviously Kane. It's those four names. And I think they're so far above the rest in terms of getting those goals in the Southgate era. And that's where I think Rashford got a little bit of points for me. So
he's got 25 starts, 56 caps in total, and 16 goals. So, I mean, obviously a lot of those are sub appearances, so that's a big part of it. But yeah, was on fire in the World Cup. Great free kick against Wales as well, which I was right behind, which is amazing. And yeah,
how frustrated were you though when he came on against Brazil, and it just felt like everything he's doing at the moment, it just seems to be the wrong decision. He just cannot seem to get past a man.
Yeah, so on the way here, I watched I sent one to you, but I watched montages of every England goal for every tournament, and the World Cup. He is in such a state of flow, and he's just not in that state of flow right now. And I wonder if that's something to sort of to play on Southgate's mind, and if it would ever lead to him maybe not starting. And I think with Rashford, when it was the World Cup, he stepped in. He was in a lovely place where he was like feeling good. There wasn't any pressure on him to go and start because he wasn't starting initially. And it's when you go for a run and you can see someone ahead of you, it's kind of easier to chase them than to sort of, once you're ahead of them, you're sort of thinking, oh no, I know. And I think that's maybe something that Rashford's struggling with, and of course all the noise when it comes to Man United as well. As much as I think as he's saying he's not saying I'm fine, but I think his body language is something that where he's just confidence is low right now, and I think it can come back. But I think it's been. I would love to see another peak with him, but he does seem a bit up and down at times. But yeah, maybe a bit high for me, but he's even higher for you. So we'll find out where that is in just a second. So who have you got next on your list?
Kieran Trippier.
He's great. He needs to get fit, and he's now a left back for England. Do you think?
Which, by the way, I think is just brilliant that we've had him as an option, because especially going into the Euros as well, first game of the tournament. Plays at left back. There is a bit of shot. Well, hang on a second. Looking at the line, was trying to work out. Well, hang on, where does that fit? Because we've got him in the team and Walker in the team. But the fact that we were able to call on him to do that, it really did mean something.
I think he should be so proud of his England career because with so many great players there, and Southgate looking to find a way to keep him in there. Again, I struggle. I get it if you want to put him on the left hand side. I think. When it comes to set pieces, you have to get Trent in, and if you're going to get Trent in, you're probably going to want him to take the bulk of those set pieces. So that might make him slightly surplus now, but in terms of impact for England, because we'll get to Eric Dyer, but that 2018, it wasn't it wasn't the best, but it was a starting point. And for him to come in and do as well as he did, where were you for the goal? Do you remember where you were?
I was in Victoria Warehouse in Manchester, with friends, and oh my days, I think it was just like it's like some sort of whiplash when it happened. There's this confusion as to what on earth has just happened.
Yeah,
which is very similar to Luke Shaw's goal as well.
Oh yeah, wow, that was amazing. Were you at that game?
Yeah.
That was ridiculous. So yeah, Kieran Trippier in 11th spot. I think he should be very proud of that position. It'd be interesting to see if he goes. I think he will go for a similar reason in terms of the cycle. I've got Jordan Henderson. I think, Jordan Henderson, I think he has been a very good soldier for Southgate, very important in several different ways. And say like the Senegal game, he was a joke. Like he was absolutely phenomenal. And I think that, again, I don't know if it's going to translate to the Euros, because I do think some of the games can be a higher standard. I say that tentatively because Senegal are obviously a great team with a great squad, but we just sort of ran over them in that game, and Henderson was kind of part of that, screaming at Bukayo Saka constantly. Right, we're in the top 10 now. Who have you got?
I've got Rashford.
In 10th spot, I've gone for Bukayo Saka. Who have you got 9th?
Bukayo Saka. This is where it gets so difficult because he could very much easily be higher up. I think it took Saka a while to settle in by international team standards, because by a while I mean a handful of games.
Yeah.
But now he's one of those players where it's just a given. He are those first on the team sheet players on that right hand side. There's no debate about it, and he's established that. And he is world class. The debate at the moment is Bukayo Saka world class.
You think he is world class?
Yeah, he is.
Okay, interesting. That's another video. 9th spot for me, Raheem Sterling. Watching back the goals from these tournaments, Raheem Sterling scored more than I thought, because I remember 2018 he had a tough time. But 2020 he scored lots of goals, and one concern it created for me was the ability of someone aside from Harry Kane being in the box for England, because that's what he wants to do. And they were ugly. Some of these goals were ugly goals. Well, not ugly goals, but they were on the 6-yard line. And that's actually a skill that Foden doesn't have, and I don't think Saka has, and I don't think Rashford has. They'll get into the box, but they're going to kind of stick their head in where it hurts. I think Sterling has that a little bit more, but he has less when it comes to maybe other technical aspects of it all. But he's been kind of hard done by, I think, by Southgate.
Oh yeah, 100%. And also, I think he's been hard done by the whole nation. He's been hard done by the media. Going into that tournament, people were on his back in that Euros, really on his back, and it didn't seem to matter what he did. They were still asking him questions they should not have been asking him. I remember he was asked in an interview after the game, after he'd scored, he said, "Do you think you've justified your selection in the team?" And I think he just repeated the question back to the reporter as if to say, "Have you really just asked me that?" Right. Because he scored goals that we literally needed. We really desperately needed. He was that player. And I think with Raheem Sterling, as I said before, where we've become so reliant on the actual goals of Harry Kane, it's Sterling in those games when Kane has taken a while to come into matches. It's Sterling that has been there for us and got us through matches, which is why I've got him a little bit higher up. Yeah, no,
I'm okay with that. I think, we're watching the goals, and they're just clever, almost like strikers' goals. A lot of these goals, and his movement is brilliant. Was it the Croatia scores against Czech Republic? He scores against Germany, of course, as well.
I believe I remember him feeding Harry Kane through for one of his goals as well during that tournament.
Yeah, he does for the Ukraine, the first goal against Ukraine. He does that as well. Yeah, I think he kind of, because he had to go home, didn't he, during the World Cup? He actually scores in the first game. Really good goal, actually. And then kind of, slowly there's people saying you've got to get Foden in the team, and or Rashford starting to sort of pop off as well. So he kind of lost his place, which I'm okay with. It shows our depth, I guess, in those areas that he's not knocking about. And I think it must, in terms of like the nation sort of being hard on him, absolutely. And I think it's because I think he's a little bit introverted and a little bit, a little bit cold. And I think it's a real shame that people can't seem to provide warmth to him because he has that demeanour, and you're inevitably going to kind of close up a little bit more as well when you have those experiences that he's had in his life.
I think he's one of those players that just seems to when you've got a pre-built idea of a player and their ability, and a lot of people have a pre-built negative idea of Sterling. They're just waiting to be proved right.
Totally.
And because he started this season well with Chelsea, I believed, but he's obviously really hit a rough patch.
Yeah.
But it's every time he does well, he doesn't seem to be given his flowers. But every time he hits a rough patch, it's like, told you, he's
I think
not
you're
good.
right. But yeah, he's sort of, he had to leave halfway through the tournament. And then, Southgate's kind of, forgotten him a little bit, which I think for the loyalty that he's shown other players, I think, again, there's more options in those areas, so kind of fair enough. I thought he'd bring him back. I'm surprised that he hasn't. And I think it's a touch unfair, but maybe he feels like he's got, better players coming through. I think Rashford, again, profile-wise, maybe Rashford being a bit more sort of gazelle-like, and he's got that kind of unbelievable finish on him, whereas the aesthetic of Sterling, the way he runs and sometimes how he strikes the ball, I think people are kind of looking for him to trip up a little bit. But he's been fantastic for Southgate. I think he's played for Southgate more than any other player, which is interesting. I put Eric Dyer in 8th, obviously because of the penalty. And again, when we talk about starting points, the penalty against Colombia, there have been hurdles that have allowed for his survival, and there was such a mental block when it came to penalties, and to get over that hurdle, you just don't see the rest of it. I think Southgate gets eaten up if we go out, because we played well and they were difficult and dirty.
But you not remember that I think that game was such a turning point game. Look, did you see the faces of so many different people? You look at John Stone's face. There's a sudden arrogance that came above him in a good way.
Belief.
Yeah, belief. And swagger. And then, but Southgate, it was just like a collapse to his knees. Yeah. The relief he felt, and like you said, I think it was that moment that if we were to get knocked out on penalties in the future, that's not a curse. It's not something that would be over us, because we've proven we can do it.
Yeah, and that's it. I think sometimes, football, luck is involved, and when it comes to penalty shootouts, like, who knows what's going to happen? Sometimes you just need something, and you don't really care how. And it wasn't the best penalty, but it went in, and we needed that. And Eric Dyer provided that. And so, although it's just one moment, it's a huge moment, because I think, again, the sort of entitlement that we have now of expecting semi-finals and things like that, I think this was a starting point of that as well, because we're like, oh, okay, look, we're on the road to something here. And so crucial, that goal for me. So that's why I've gone as high as I have. Okay, 7th spot. Who did you have?
Declan Rice.
Declan Rice in 7th spot. Okay. Thoughts on him?
Yeah, we're at a point now where actually he's the player that, in terms of who you think the best player for England is, he's actually the most irreplaceable player. He's the player that if anything happened to him, touch wood profusely, we would be really, really in trouble.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think he's done brilliantly. I think, again, talk about the sort of aesthetics of players. You kind of have it in your head that he's a centre-back, and he's not really ever been a centre-back. And he's so much more than that. And I think people are seeing that more and more as time progresses. He's so settled in there, isn't he? And I think the conversation's always been him and who. No one's really had huge problems with him. I think people wondered if he could be that deep-lying 6. And again, his ability to drive with the ball. Can you find a midfield that's fluid enough to allow him to do that sometimes? And Bellingham sees it and maybe drops in for him at times. I would like to see that, because I think there's a superpower there with Declan Rice. And I also think, in terms of impact moving forwards, get him on corners.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because, to be fair, Arsenal have been one of the best set-piece sides in the Premier League this season. So it makes so much sense. And if he is going to play Maguire, then we may as well just play to his strengths.
Yeah. And if he does, again, it's one of those where I go, I get it. Like 1 + 1 = 2. Let's score goals from set pieces. That Arsenal are doing that brilliantly this year. That's making up for not having that out-and-out striker who bangs in loads of goals. So, and we've got one of them as well. So let's take whatever we can. So you had Luke Shaw a bit further down, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Luke Shaw is in 6th spot for me. The assists, again, that Euro 2020, he is phenomenal.
Yeah.
phenomenal. And that's kind of why I put him as high as I did. Some lovely assists in there in the Ukraine game. He's got a beautiful one, cross for Harry Kane, I want to say. There's a set piece that he takes at some point as well. And we're missing him. I think we're massively missing him. And I think if he can get back, get fit, and feel confident and play the way that he's playing, that really does elevate us massively. And of course scored a gorgeous goal in that final, which was the only critique I would have is just a little bit early.
Yeah.
Like, I would have liked that. Imagine that in like the 70th minute, it would have been like unbelievable.
But that's where it comes in, where that's the one thing where I am really willing to sit down and listen to people who are against Southgate, is when they discuss that final and how we go 1-0 straight away in that game, and then we just try and hold on to it. And we don't. But then you could also argue that the way Italy scored with that set piece and the way it was that could very easily not happen. It's fine margins in football.
So, and how many games of football have you watched where you're in the lead and or you're a goal down and you're pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and you get one and then they're on the attack again. Yeah. Like that's the ebb and flow. That's game state for me. I was at that game and I said at halftime to my dad, I said, "All we need is a clean sheet. We're champions of Europe." So, and that's not. I don't think that's a. I'm not sure we'd conceded. Had we conceded by that point? Like we hadn't conceded many goals up to that point, right?
Just the Denmark goal, wasn't it?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Which was a screamer. Yeah. So I was like, "This is fine." I was okay with it. I think people look back on that unfairly a little bit. I think you got to accept what it was, and we were close. We were near. Like I get it. Like we'll just go and beat them. Like it doesn't always work like that for me.
And also, as a half Italian, I've got to show some respect to Italy in that tournament. They were phenomenal, and this is Italy, by the way. Some nations in those tournaments, in those finals, they just have something about them that they bring to the tournament, that winning mentality that I do believe it counts for something. I think it's why we've only won one World Cup in the history of the competition.
Mentality is a huge part of it. Cultural mentality, I think, for sure. I agree. And also, I think the thing to remember with Italy as well is, okay, they came in having had troubles, but they came in on an incredible run and then were probably the best team in the tournament up until that point. So you step into that final, yes, it's about equal because we've got home advantage. But Italy weren't underdogs.
No.
Like it was I think you could have gone, who's a better team or who's playing better football? I think you could have happily said them. So I think some things get rewritten when it comes to all that. 5th is Harry Maguire. Have we spoken about Harry? I think would he start for you?
It's so hard, isn't it? I to be honest with you, up until this very point, I've said I still think Stones and Maguire makes total sense. And then we've got centre-backs that we can take. And if Harry Maguire has a performance, like he's had a few performances for England now in recent times where he's been either to blame or partially to blame for us conceding goals, if that's something that exists, is Southgate going to have that ruthlessness to take him out and make the necessary correction? And if he is, start with him, that's fine. But if he thinks once he's in, he's just in then, and he's the centre-back, then actually I'd listen to people saying maybe someone else.
He's been absolutely phenomenal for Southgate. In terms of an attacking asset as well from set pieces, 2018 was built on that, and Harry Maguire in particular. And the Euros, I say this and people jump on it. In major tournaments when it really, really, really matters, he's been exemplary. Touch wood, touch wood, touch wood. He really has, and people don't want to give that to him. I think, again, for sort of aesthetics and, stuff that's got nothing to do with the actual performances. He's been brilliant. He's been absolutely brilliant.
Also, rapid defenders or upcoming defenders, they don't ever really seem to be part of winning teams in these tournaments. When you look at some of the teams like Bonucci and Chiellini, Ricardo Carvalho and Pepe for Portugal, with it. Defenders who know each other's game, they know each other's strengths and weaknesses, where they're going to be on the pitch. They don't have to think about it; they just know it.
Yeah.
I think that counts in a tournament for something as much as anything else.
Yeah. And I think if you think of the experience matters as well. Like, again, with those names that you've just mentioned, like hundreds of caps between them. So having a set two, I think often will, with tournament experience, I think, again, Southgate will probably kind of lean back towards it. And I think a lot of games gets won or lost with set pieces. So, again, that's another sort of feather in his cap. So, but he's been so good for England in major tournaments. He just has. Okay, 4th spot. Who you got?
I've got John Stones.
Let's talk John Stones then briefly. I think there's very, very few better in the world than him.
Yeah, very few better in the world. And do you know what's really lovely about John Stones? He's been so considerate because whenever John Stones has had rough patches in his career, he's never let that coincide with an England tournament. So at every England tournament, he's been absolutely quality, which is why he's such a constant in the team.
Do you know what I love about watching him now is I think overall he was actually not the loudest, but now if you see any breaker play, I think he could be a really good coach. Because I think I see that now. You see him talking to Pep all the time. The role that he's playing, when you're playing in those roles and you're getting those reps that he's getting in those roles, you have to really understand the ebb and flow of a game to kind of go, okay, when do I need to pop back? When do I need to step in? From where he was, and again, we've spoken about this with a few centre-backs, people thought he was rubbish. They did. And he has just gently cemented into a world-class centre-back. He's, again, in the World Cup in Qatar, I watched him, I was just like, wow. He was just walking through the game, like just stunning on the ball, so calm on the ball. Again, you could build a team with him, like around him a little bit if you wanted to do the thing where he steps in. But again, I think it's a bit too much. But yeah, consummate pro. So you'd feel better about Maguire because Stones is there, don't you? Or whoever will be the centre-back that's with him. Top 3. 3rd spot.
Kyle Walker.
He's just been so crucial defensively. I think he has allowed for us to get around certain systems, and he's been world class in his performances for England alongside Stones, dealing with a lot of incredible footballers along the way.
That's why I've got Kyle Walker 3rd as well. Is just because of the fact that he had such a specific advantage to us that you can pinpoint like that. You know exactly why he needed to be at the tournament. And actually, I don't think Kyle Walker's been especially that great this season.
No.
But it doesn't mean anything. He still has to be on that plane because he is, to many, our only hope at defending against those really fast strikers, those 1v1 battles.
He's a security blanket. He makes you feel safer. And I think that has, again, when it comes to Southgate, you would love to have Trent and all these exciting people, but he will always go back to Kyle Walker because if it's 0-0, you haven't lost. And Kyle Walker provides so much safety when it comes to that. So your 2nd spot was?
Jordan Pickford.
Okay. My 2nd spot was Harry Kane.
So I think Harry Kane best. You think Jordan Pickford best?
Yes. And I think the reason I'm saying that, I know goals matter, but for him to step in, he is always the number one. He hasn't really had... He had competition along the way, but they sort of popped in, not been to his level, been sort of ushered back out. Came in pretty quickly after Joe Hart, and Joe Hart was going through that difficult time with West Ham, and so it was kind of the end of him, and so he needed to arrive at the time that he arrived. Helped with those penalties, of course, as well. I think he has been exemplary for England, non-stop. Again, I'm so scared to say all this, but not put a foot wrong for England. No sort of bad moments of form. Of course, you can look at certain elements when it comes to Everton, but I think overall, he's been absolutely amazing for England, and you haven't had to worry about him, even though people kind of want to worry about him.
Yeah, I think he's definitely the most disrespected England player, 100%.
So Harry Kane's your number 1? Yeah, he was my number 2. Why is Harry Kane your number 1?
Yeah, I mean, it could literally be either of those two. But in terms of the player that I think we've relied upon the most, I think we've relied upon Harry Kane the most. I think watching that game, that Brazil, I know it's just a friendly, but watching that Brazil game and watching Ollie Watkins really struggle to come into the game, whether or not that's his fault or the way that we set up, I'm not sure. And I'm not going to judge him off that one game. However, watching that lack of presence up top, it really reminds you, oh wow, we really need Harry Kane.